Welcome, everyone. This is Brother Doug. I'm with my mom. My mom's gracing us with her presence today. I'm with my mom, Sharon, with my sister, Shoshana, my brother, Dennis, and our sister, Sally. We are going to be doing a study today about the Noahide laws, exposing them and exposing the Babylonian Talmud, which in Judaism is actually their authority. They don't hold to the Torah as their authority, as we've been taught. They actually hold to this above the Torah. And just for a little introduction, I will be leaving links down on documentaries I've found about this. And this one guy named Stephen Anderson, who's a Baptist pastor, he actually went into the land of Israel and talked to rabbis and all this stuff. And so he actually got firsthand what they actually believe, most of them in modern Judaism, and most of them entertain the idea of evolution. They entertain the idea that the creation account wasn't literally 6 days. They're not against basically, mainstream false science. They don't even do circumcisions anymore, the one rabbi told them. So all they do is like prickle to get a little bit of blood, and that's it. And that's what the rabbi said. So the idea that Judaism is the religion of the Old Testament is a lie. In actuality, what we know as Judaism today would have been known back in the day as Phariseeism, Sadduceeism, the tradition of the elders.
I want to say this, Doug, that when my son was born, I had him circumcised by a Jewish rabbi on the 8th day, and they did a full circumcision. So evidently the group that did that was not going by the group in Israel that you.
Yeah, the rabbi himself actually says it. So this is not even me like putting my opinion out there. This is the actual rabbi that the guy interviewed. So the documentary is called Marching to Zion. This Christian guy basically went to Israel, talked to all these rabbis and stuff, and they told him like what they practice, and a lot of it's not even Torah. A lot of it is Kabbalah, mysticism, believing in they're not even proposed to evolution, like I said before.
Wow.
It's definitely different nowadays. Maybe back at some point in time they were still practicing some of the Torah, but at this point it's mostly the Talmud. And just introduction to the Talmud, the one of the biggest beliefs they have is that the Talmud, the oral, also known as the oral law, was taught by these elders that had supposedly a higher revelation than Moses. So they think that the Talmud is higher than the Torah. So, and that's just one of the things that's spoken of in the Talmud. But we're going to start off. There's actually a prophecy that said that there would be a character that would basically try to change Yahuwah's law. So we're going to go to Daniel, and I'm going to put it on share screen here from my eSword app. Anyone that doesn't have eSword app, this is free for Windows. It's a great Bible app. You can get tons of translations for free. So I'm going to go to the book of Daniel here. Let's see here. Chapter 7. And let me go to the Brenton Septuagint, English Septuagint. Go to verse, I believe it's verse 25, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. Daniel chapter 7, verse 25, and I'm reading from the English Septuagint here. It says, "And he shall speak words against the Most High, and shall wear out the set-apart ones of the Most High, and shall think to change times and law. And power shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time." Now, most people, when they come across this verse, like number one thought, Catholicism, because they try to change the Sabbath, and they replaced Passover with Easter. And most of the time, I'll tell you right now, on our calendar, we're keeping the legit lunar Karaite biblical calendar this year. I just found out that Easter this year possibly might be when Passover is this year. So the Vatican knows about the true calendar, and a lot of times they'll substitute a pagan holiday on the day of Yahuwah's feast on purpose. And many times since we've been keeping the Passover, a lot of times on years, the Catholic Church will be having Easter on the same night as the Passover purposely. So Constantine back in 321 AD was the first one to do this. So he was the first, quote unquote, first pope. And he basically forcible by law said that you cannot, if you are a believer in the Messiah and you keep the Sabbath, you're going to die. And basically for a lot, that's where you get the whole Dark Ages, what's known as the Dark Ages of the Catholic Church. You know, it started with Constantine and it continued on, but also this verse can apply to Judaism because they have something called the Noahide laws. And so I'm going to go real quick here, stay on the shared screen, and I'm going to type in Noahide. I don't know why it didn't go into the search bar here. My bad about that. Noahide laws. Enter. So let's see here. You got Wikipedia. I want to go to something a little bit more accurate. I think I'm going to go into Encyclopedia Britannica. This is a little bit more accurate. This is Encyclopedia my dad told me about years ago.
We used to have it until we had to move.
Man, because that's a great encyclopedia. I know we have the Merriam-Webster one.
We had the World Book, but we also had Britannica at one time.
All right, here we go. So it says the Noahide laws, also called Noachian laws, a Jewish Talmudic designation for 7 biblical laws given to Adam and Noah before the revelation to Moses on Mount Sinai, and consequently binding on all mankind. So what this is saying right here, it's already making an assumption just because the Talmud says it, that these laws were given to the descendants of Noah before Moses. Nowhere in Scripture will you find this at all. Not in the Apocrypha, nowhere. You will not find it in the Book of Enoch. You will not find it in Jubilees. You will not find it anywhere. It's only in the Babylonian Talmud, and this is Encyclopedia Britannica. This is not Wikipedia. This is actually a legit encyclopedia. So it says, and then it goes citing Genesis 2:16 and all that. The Babylonian Talmud listed the first 6 commandments as prohibitions against idolatry, blasphemy, murder, adultery, robbery, and positive commands to establish courts of right ruling. Now, I want to stop here real quick. Problem is, who are creating these 7 laws? These are people that have rejected Yahusha as the Messiah, that only believe that there's the Father and no one else creating the world. So already they have a bias. So idolatry in their eyes would be you confessing that Yahusha is the son of the living Elohim, and subsequently they would call that idolatry. And
Right.
if you believe in the New Testament, like we do, the Brit Hadashah, then you also believe that he's equal with the Father, according to Philippians chapter 2, which, according to them, would be blasphemy. So that's strike 2 already. Murder. Now, what's interesting here is the Talmud, even though it says for us, quote-unquote, goyim, cattle, that's another thing. The Talmud says the goyim, the so-called, people that are not in Judaism are not Jewish, which, don't get it confused. There's a difference between Jewish and Yahudim. We'll talk about that later. But murdering is okay if they do it to a goyim, but a goyim can't do it to them. So there's the partiality there. So basically, they can kill a goyim, what they would call someone like me or my mom or anyone that's not a Khazarian or Ashkenazi. Anyone that's not their ethnicity would be a goyim.
I'm just laughing looking at these advertisements.
Yeah, I try to ignore it because there's nothing you can do. Google does that all the time. So basically, anyone that's not their ethnicity, they would consider cattle. Goyim actually means cattle in the Talmud. And so they would just consider us basically slaves to them, and they could kill us and nothing would happen to them. So that's just partiality right there. Adultery. Now, what's weird is we can't commit adultery, but they can be committing pedophilia according to the Talmud. So where's the logic in that one? And robbery. The Talmud I have written down from the video here, it says that they can rob a goyim and they will get no punishment. But if a goyim robs them, the goyim gets punished. So, where's the logic in that one? And then it says to establish courts of right ruling with all that this implies. Basically, they would establish courts to enforce these laws in their own context. So basically, that would judge impartiality. So that's another problem too, because the Talmud, outside of these Noahide laws, every commandment that's commanded to us, there's a loophole for them that they don't have to follow these. So again, that would be why our court system's all screwed up. And let's see, I think the seventh one says, after the flood, a seventh commandment given to Noah forbade the eating of flesh cut from a living animal. Okay, first of all, who would be doing that? I'm going to eat the flesh of an animal while it's still alive. Think about it. Like, who would do that anyway?
Yeah.
Like, what am I, like a weird, like, Satanist or something?
That's
like,
disgusting.
Like, that's just common sense. That's already in the Torah. Like, that's just common sense, You're not supposed to eat and the animal doesn't have to be just dead. You're supposed to pour the blood out, according to the Torah. So you're not eating the life source. And the whole part of the blood, anyone that doesn't know about this, is that the life is in the blood. So you're eating the actual life that's in the animal. Even though it's dead, the life is still in the blood. So you still got to pour the blood out to get the life out of it for it to be lawful to eat the animal.
I can attest to that this week after losing almost half my blood. Believe me, the life is in the blood.
And you know what's messed up? Back in George Washington's days, this is just a funny factoid here, is that back in George Washington's days, they thought it was okay to bloodlet people. And the funniest thing, I don't know.
News
that to people, but there are people who have too much blood. There is
Mom, it's almost a certainty you do that, the person's going to die. You're literally letting out the life source.
Well, okay, I won't get into it.
I'm just letting you know what they teach in medical school is not correct.
Well, there are people that have too much blood, and it can cause big medical problems.
But what was happening back then was just because they had a little disease, they were letting out all the blood in the person to get the disease out.
Okay.
And the funny thing is, George Washington did this, thought it was okay to bloodlet himself. He had a Bible right on his nightstand telling him the life's in the blood. So there's the irony for that.
Right.
But
it killed him. It actually killed him.
Yeah, it literally killed him to bloodlet himself.
Oh yeah, well he probably let out everything.
Because what he was trying to do, instead of using leeches like back in Middle Eastern countries and the Asian areas would use leeches to get out the bad blood.
Excuse me.
Unfortunately, they thought bloodletting would get out the blood that's infected. So
they were giving him mercury too.
Yeah. So here we go. Now we're going to go also to the next big verse here, which in Acts 10:28, a lot of their commandments have to do with not associating with quote unquote goyim. That it is sinful, according to the tradition of the elders, to eat with a goyim or to associate with a goyim or even to drink. Say I was a goyim and my mom's in Judaism. If I was to touch this cup of hers right now, she can't drink it because I touched it with my finger, her cup. That's just one of their laws. And in the book of Acts, chapter 10, verse 28, it says, hold on. I want to get this up here for, because it's a lot easier to read it from the screen. And he said to them, you know that a Yahudite man, a Judean man, is not allowed to associate or go to one of another ethnicity. But Yahuwah has shown me that I should not call any man common or unclean. So basically, Peter is acknowledging the tradition of the elders to them. He's saying, according to your laws, I'm not supposed to be with a Gentile or goyim, but Yahuwah has shown me that no man is common or unclean. This was the problem Peter and Paul had. This is why Paul yelled at him, because he was actually adhering to something from the Talmud. And Paul was ticked off at him, to put it nicely. He's like, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? How are you going to be, a witness to the Yahudim, to preach Messiah to them when you're doing this? You're holding to satanic traditions like that, And so it's because they were raised in that stupid culture that if you're not an Israelite, they look at you like you're a dog or an animal.
Yeah.
That wicked Talmudic culture that basically even got to Peter, unfortunately, and he repents of it, but unfortunately he messed up and started adhering to those tradition of the elders. And obviously I want to go to a general verse here that pretty much is the basis of it. It's kind of like a prophecy dealing with this same subject of the tradition of the elders. So we're going to go to the Bren Septuagint here, Isaiah 29 verse 13, and this is where Yahusha quotes from in the New Testament. So this is how we know that the Septuagint was the Apostles' Old Testament. Isaiah 29 verse 13 says, and Yahuwah has said, these people draw near to me with their mouth, and they honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. But in vain do they worship me, teaching the commandments and doctrines of men. Now, that's word for word, verbatim. That was Isaiah 29:13. Shalom, Sister Sadie. That was Isaiah 29:13 of the Septuagint. The Masoretic text is going to word it a little differently. It's people confused. So if you go to the Greek New Testament and pair that with Mark 7.
Okay, so guess what? Here's a thought that came to my mind.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, guys. Forgive me.
It's okay. It's all right. No problem. No problem.
We are
I'm just thinking.
All right.
Yeah,
So
we got about 4 minutes left.
yeah, I'm just going to fit this Mark verse in, and we'll have to do a part 2. Here we go. So Isaiah 29:13, the Septuagint, that's where Yahusha gets it in Mark 7:7. How but in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. And this is him answering the Pharisees when they're condemning his disciples for not washing pots ritualistically and eating without unwashed hands, because they don't ritualistically wash their hands before a meal. And they're trying to say that's sin. So in context of the chapter, that's what he's referring to. And then he says in verse 9, and he said unto them, full well you reject the commandment of Yahuwah, not Elohim, that you may keep your own tradition. And that I was reading from the Restored Name King James. It's only one of the few translations that actually put Yahuwah there instead of Elohim in that verse. So those were those verses here, Mark 7:6 and 7:9. So verse 9 is the other verse there. And then you also have verse 13 in the same chapter, making the word of Yahuwah of none effect through your tradition which you have delivered, and such like things you do. So basically, all these traditions that the elders would have, they would make them supersede Yahuwah's commandments, or they would be commandments that man's commandments that would basically contradict Yahuwah's word, that would break his word, making it of none effect. And that's basically what Yahusha is saying here. So we're running out of time right now, so we're going to do a part 2 shortly, so stay tuned. This is Brother Doug, sign off with my mom Sharon, my sister Shoshana, our brother Dennis, our sister Sadie, and our sister Sally. Shalom. Stay tuned for the part 2. I don't see the morning here. That's weird.